The last invitation. I didn't expect the letter. It came on a Thursday, tucked between bills and an overdue magazine subscription I hadn't asked for. The envelope was thick, formal, cream-colored with gold foil edging, like something meant for weddings or funerals. My name was written in a hand I hadn't seen in years. Elegant, severe, familiar in a way that made my chest tighten. I didn't need to open it to know where it came from, or who it came from. Still, I stood there in the kitchen, my daughter's lunchbox half-packed, the kettle long forgotten on the stove, and stared at the thing like it might vanish if I blinked. I opened it. Of course I did. You are cordially invited to the 75th birthday celebration of Margaret Whitmore, Saturday, 3 p.m. Formal attire requested, family only. There was no, "we hope you can attend." No warmth, just a statement, a fact. My mother was turning 75, and she, or someone using her name, had decided I was still technically family. Maybe for the day. Maybe for a goodbye. My hands trembled a little as I placed the card back into the envelope. I hadn't spoken to my mother in 8 years. Not since Layla was born. Not since the last conversation that left more wounds than words. "Are you going?" Layla's voice cut through the quiet, her head poking around the corner with a spoon still in her mouth. She was 10 now, curious and sharp, but always gentle. She had never met my mother, not once, but she knew the stories. She knew the silence too. I hesitated, then shrugged. "It's complicated." Layla tilted her head. "Do they want to see me?" I didn't have an answer to that, not one I could say out loud. The truth was, no one had asked about Layla. No one had sent gifts or letters or even a text after she was born. My mother hadn't held her. My siblings hadn't congratulated me. In their eyes, I had made a choice to marry someone they didn't approve of, to build a life they didn't recognize, to step away from the performance of perfection we had all been raised to preserve. And when my husband passed away 3 years later, I didn't call them. I didn't want condolences written in cold ink. I wanted silence, and I got it. But now, this card, this invitation, not for Layla, not even truly for me. It felt like a formality, a final act, a door creaking open just long enough to be seen through, but never walked back into. And yet, Layla stood in front of me, eyes bright, as if this could be a story worth telling someday. "Maybe," I said. "We'll see." That night, as she slept, I took the card back out and ran my fingers over the embossing. I remembered how my mother used to host parties where everything matched: napkins, flowers, voices. I remembered how quiet my father had been, how my brothers laughed only when she laughed, how I learned early that love came with rules, and breaking them meant erasure. I had broken every rule, and I had been erased. But this card? It was proof I hadn't vanished completely. And maybe, just maybe, I didn't need permission to walk back in. We packed light, just a weekend bag, 2 dresses, one for Layla, one for me, and a small box of things I told myself were just-in-case items. Extra shoes, an old necklace I hadn't worn in years, and a framed picture of Layla with her dad. I wasn't sure why I brought that last one. Maybe it was a kind of armor. Maybe it was a quiet reminder to myself of the life I had built, brick by brick, after everything else had crumbled. The drive took 6 hours. Layla spent most of it watching the trees blur by, legs crossed in the back seat, headphones on, but never truly detached. Every now and then she asked questions, half curious, half cautious. "What was Grandma like when you were little?" I hesitated every time. I didn't want to lie, but I didn't want to poison her wonder either. "She liked things to be perfect," I'd say. "She taught me how to fold napkins like swans." Layla blinked. "That sounds kind of cool." I smiled. It was, sometimes. We arrived just as the sun began to slide behind the hills. The Whitmore estate looked exactly as I remembered. Pale stone, ivy-covered walls, symmetrical hedges that had been trimmed so often they looked unnatural. Like everything in my childhood, it was beautiful, but cold. I parked by the side gate, the one I used to sneak through during teenage nights when I just needed to breathe. I didn't expect anyone to greet us, and no one did. Layla stepped out first, her sneakers crunching against the gravel. "It smells like old soap and flowers." I laughed, soft and surprised. "That's exactly right." She adjusted her dress, the one with tiny white stars she picked herself. "Do I look okay?" I nodded. "You look like someone they won't be able to forget." And I meant it. The front door opened before we reached it. My older brother Henry stood there, still tall, still stiff, still wearing a watch that probably cost more than my car. He didn't smile. "You made it," he said, like he'd lost a bet. "I did," I replied. "This is Layla." His eyes flicked to her, then back to me. "She looks like you." Layla held out her hand. "Nice to meet you." He didn't shake it, just stepped aside. "Mom's in the garden." The inside of the house was untouched. The same heavy drapes, the same porcelain figurines lining the mantel, the same echo in the halls that made you feel like a guest, even if you lived there. Layla walked carefully, her eyes scanning every surface like it might talk back. I saw her pause in front of a photograph, my wedding, the one my mother hadn't attended. "That's you," she said quietly. "Yeah," I whispered. "A long time ago." The garden hadn't changed either. Roses in perfect lines, not a petal out of place. My mother sat beneath the awning, wrapped in a shawl despite the warmth. Her hair was silver now, but her posture hadn't aged. She looked up as we approached and nodded once. "You came." I didn't say anything. Layla stepped forward. "Hi. I'm Layla." My mother looked at her for a long moment. "I know." No smile, no embrace, just that. We sat. Tea was served by someone I didn't recognize. No one asked how we'd been. No one mentioned my husband. My mother spoke mostly to Henry, occasionally to someone named Margaret Jr., a cousin I hadn't seen since she was in braces. Layla tried to follow the conversation, but her eyes kept drifting to the flowers, to the bees, to the birds that didn't seem afraid of us. I leaned over and whispered, "If you get bored, you can explore. Just stay close." She nodded and wandered a few feet toward the fountain. That night, we stayed in my old room. Nothing had changed. Same wallpaper, same bed, even the same scratch on the windowsill from the time I tried to climb out during a thunderstorm. Layla curled up next to me. "Why don't they hug?" she asked. "Is that a rule?" I pulled her close. "Dear, love isn't loud." She thought for a moment. "That's sad." I didn't disagree. The next day arrived wrapped in pressed linen and polished silverware. By noon, the house began to fill with the rest of the family. Uncles, aunts, cousins in pearl earrings and cologne that arrived before they did. They greeted one another with cheek kisses and too loud compliments. No one asked me anything meaningful, just the kind of things that fill space without touching it. "Long drive? How's your place? She's grown so tall." They smiled like nothing had been broken, like time healed things just by passing. Layla stuck close at first, holding my hand through the hallway, her eyes darting from portrait to portrait. "Are these all family?" she whispered. "Yes," I said, "even the ones who don't remember it." She didn't laugh, she just nodded and moved on. At some point, she disappeared into the study where my father used to sit with books he rarely read. I let her go. Some parts of this house could still be safe for her, even if they never had been for me. Lunch was elaborate. 5 courses, 3 toasts, 0 warmth. My mother sat at the head of the table, flanked by Henry and Margaret Jr. like bookends. I was placed at the far end with Layla beside me. Distant. Out of frame. Everyone ate with quiet precision. Even Layla tried to match their rhythm, though she fumbled once with the soup spoon and earned a glance from someone I didn't recognize. She straightened in her seat. I placed a hand on her knee under the table. She relaxed a little. Then came the gifts. One by one, wrapped boxes and velvet bags made their way to the front. Jewelry, framed family trees, a designer scarf, a limited edition wine, all elegant, all predictable. When it was done, there was a pause, a silence that begged for closure. But Layla stood up, slowly, carefully, a small rectangular box in her hands, wrapped in brown paper with tiny silver stars. Not store-bought, not fancy, just hers. "I brought something too," she said. No one moved, no one smiled. But she walked the full length of the table, shoes tapping lightly, and placed it in front of my mother. "It's for you," she said. "From me." My mother didn't touch it at first, just looked at the package like it might be ticking. Then with 2 fingers she opened the folds. Inside was a picture frame, hand-painted uneven, and within it a drawing. A tree. With 3 branches. One labeled before, one labeled now, and one that simply said, "Still here." No one spoke. The room held its breath. My mother looked up at Layla. Their eyes met, and for the first time something flickered across her face that I hadn't seen in decades. Not softness, not regret, but maybe the beginning of something that could lead to either. "Thank you," she said. The words came brittle, unused, but they came. Layla smiled, small and real, and walked back without looking back. Later that evening, after the dishes were cleared and the guests drifted into separate corners of the house, Layla found me on the back porch. She leaned into my side. "I think they don't remember how to feel," she whispered. "But I think maybe that helped." I kissed her temple. "You helped?" She didn't reply. She just sat there with me, two shadows in the golden light, waiting for the house to remember how to breathe. That morning arrived slow and gray, the kind of morning that didn't ask for permission to be heavy. Outside my window, the sky was smeared in a quiet, colorless fog, and for a moment I couldn't tell if I had really heard the soft footsteps or if they were just a memory knocking again. I slipped out of bed with the kind of stillness you learn from years of moving through rooms where noise wasn't welcome, and I followed the sound like it might be a secret worth uncovering. Down the old hallway, past the crooked painting of my parents' wedding and the grandfather clock that hadn't chimed since I was a teenager, I reached the sunroom. There, just beyond the glass, were two silhouettes. One small and curious, the other rigid and composed. Layla and my mother sat side by side on the iron bench beneath the magnolia tree, the same bench where my mother used to sit alone during parties, untouched by the chaos around her. I didn't move closer. Not yet. Instead, I watched from behind the curtain, the way you watch something you're not sure you're allowed to witness. Layla had a notebook on her lap. She was drawing, as she often did when words felt too heavy. My mother wasn't speaking, just watching. Her hands were folded neatly, her back straight, her gaze fixed on something distant. Not the drawing, not Layla. Something beyond both. Then Layla spoke. Her voice was so soft I barely heard it over the creak of the house settling. "Do you ever feel like everyone's looking at you but not really seeing you?" My mother turned to her. I saw it, just a flicker. That pause, that tiny stumble in the rhythm of her control. "What do you mean?" she asked, guarded. Layla didn't hesitate. "I mean like they see your hair or your clothes or your rules, but not what's inside, not what you're scared of." That question held her there. My mother blinked, once, twice. I expected her to deflect, to correct, but instead she said, "Sometimes." Layla nodded, accepting that as truth. "Do you want to be seen?" And with that, the space between them changed. They sat for a while, not speaking, just sitting, the way people do when they don't need noise to fill the space. My mother eventually asked, "Why do you draw so many trees?" Layla smiled, "Because they don't rush, they just stay, even when it's hard." My mother tilted her head as if that idea unsettled something inside her that had been tightly coiled for too long. When I finally stepped outside, they didn't flinch. Layla looked at me and smiled, then went back to her notebook. My mother didn't say anything, but her shoulders were softer, her face less sharp. I sat on the steps, close enough to feel the weight of the moment, but far enough to let it belong to them. That afternoon, Layla asked if she could go for a walk with her grandmother. I said yes, even though everything inside me wanted to say no. Not out of fear, but out of protectiveness. Layla sensed it. "I'll be okay," she whispered. "I just want to ask her some things." And with that, she tucked her sketchbook under her arm and took my mother's hand like it was the most natural thing in the world. They walked for almost an hour, through the orchard, past the little stone path that led to the forgotten greenhouse. When they returned, Layla looked thoughtful. My mother looked older. Later that evening, Layla climbed into bed beside me. She said she used to draw too. I turned to her. "She did?" Layla nodded, but she stopped when someone told her it was childish. I exhaled slowly. That sounded exactly right. She asked me not to tell anyone. Layla smiled, but I think she wanted me to anyway. The next day we found a small wooden box on Layla's side of the bed. Inside was a bundle of old drawings, faded, brittle, unfinished. Flowers, birds, landscapes without people. Layla held them like relics. "She used to see the world," she whispered, and then she stopped. I didn't cry. But something inside me softened, like an old knot loosening after years of tension. At lunch, my mother didn't sit at the head of the table. She chose a spot beside Layla. The others noticed. Of course they did. There were glances, shifts, but no one said a word. They didn't know how to talk to a woman who'd quietly rearranged the hierarchy without asking permission. That evening, my mother knocked on my door. Not barged, not summoned. Knocked. I opened it, unsure of what version of her I'd find. She looked tired. not in a fragile way, but in a way that suggested effort. "May I come in?" she asked. I stepped aside. We didn't sit. We just stood there, two women with too many years of silence between them. "She's extraordinary," she said. "Yes," I replied, "she is." My mother nodded. "She reminds me of someone I used to be." I didn't know what to say to that, so I said nothing. She looked down at her hands. "I wasn't gentle with you." I inhaled, steady. No, she looked up. I didn't know how. And there it was. Not an apology, but an admission. And sometimes that's all we need. The house began to feel smaller after that. Not physically, but emotionally. As if the air inside had thickened, like warm syrup that made every glance slower, every silence longer. The change wasn't dramatic. No slamming doors. No shouted arguments. But it was everywhere. In the way voices lowered when I entered a room, in the way conversations stopped just a second too late, in the way Margaret Jr. closed her book the moment Layla walked past. Breakfast was quiet. Too quiet. Everyone smiled more than necessary, like the forced grin of someone trying to defuse a bomb. I sat with Layla at the end of the long dining table, watching Henry read the paper, like it held answers to questions no one asked. He cleared his throat twice, then again. I could almost hear the thoughts ticking in his head. He wasn't used to me speaking up. He certainly wasn't used to me being listened to. After breakfast, Layla went outside to draw. I wandered into the library, the one room I used to love before it became hers, my mother's. It still smelled like cedar and dust, like time well kept. I ran my fingers over the spines of books I used to sneak off the shelves, novels she never wanted me to read because they were too indulgent. I used to think the word indulgent was a synonym for forbidden joy. She found me there an hour later. Not Henry. Not Margaret. My mother. She didn't say anything at first, just stood in the doorway, watching. I waited. Then she said, "You used to hide in here." I smiled faintly. I didn't know it was hiding at the time. She stepped inside. "You were always softer than the rest." I met her gaze. "You taught me that softness was a liability." She didn't deny it, she just looked tired. The door creaked again and Henry appeared. "You're needed in the parlor," he said to her. No eye contact with me, no acknowledgement. My mother looked at him, then at me, then back at him. "I'm talking with my daughter." The word daughter stung, and not in a painful way, in a way that reminded me it hadn't been used in years. Henry's jaw twitched. "Fine," he said, and disappeared. She turned back to me. "You scare them now?" I laughed under my breath. "Because I stopped being quiet?" "No," she said, "because you stopped asking for a seat at the table." The lunch table that day was the same one we'd always used. Long, polished, cold, every place setting perfect, every knife aligned. But the conversation wasn't about food or the weather or Layla's drawings. It was about me. It was about what I had become. Henry led it carefully, under the guise of concern. "You seem changed," he said across the roasted vegetables. "I suppose you'd call it growth," I replied. "Others might call it defiance," Aunt Rose chimed in. "We just want to understand." I placed my napkin down, not harshly, just deliberately. "You had years to ask questions. None of you did." Silence, the kind that came with realization, not shame. Margaret Jr. finally broke it. "Well, we didn't want to push you." Layla looked up. "But you pushed her out." That silenced even the silverware. The shift wasn't loud, but it was final. My mother didn't interrupt. She didn't calm the room like she used to. She simply watched, observed, let the silence settle where once she would have swept it under the rug. After lunch, Layla asked me if she could go back to the magnolia bench. "I like how it smells," she said. I nodded, but followed behind quietly. I wasn't ready to let her sit alone again. Not after that tension. But when I reached the garden, she wasn't alone. My mother was already there, holding a book I hadn't seen in years. A collection of poems I'd written in high school. The one she told me to throw away. The one I had thought she did throw away. "I kept it," she said when she saw me. "I didn't read it until last year. I wasn't ready." Layla sat quietly, letting us speak. I knelt beside the bench. "Why now?" I asked. "Why keep it at all?" She didn't look at me when she answered. "Because even when I was cruel, I knew your words mattered." I closed my eyes. That sentence was heavier than an apology. That evening, I cooked dinner. For the first time in that house, I moved through the kitchen not as a guest, but as someone who belonged. Henry didn't offer to help. Margaret didn't taste test anything. But they came to the table when the food was ready. And when Lila said grace, something she'd picked up from school even though we never practiced it at home, no one interrupted her. We ate in near silence. But this silence was different. It wasn't filled with judgment. It was full of thoughts. Processing. I watched them chew slowly, watched eyes drift toward me and then away. They were all calculating something. Not what I had done, but what they had failed to do. After dinner, Henry approached me in the hallway. "You know this doesn't change everything," he said. "No," I replied, "but it changed me." He didn't respond, just walked away, slower than usual. We didn't leave because of anger. We didn't leave because of pain. We left because it was time, and sometimes that's reason enough. On our last morning, I rose before the sun and sat by the window, watching the mist curl around the hedges like it had a memory of the night. The house was still, not asleep, just holding its breath, as if it too knew something was ending. Layla stirred quietly, gathering her sketchbook and the few things she'd brought. She didn't ask questions. She didn't complain. She just moved with the kind of quiet that children only have when they understand more than they should. She packed her drawings carefully, sliding them into the side pocket of her backpack. I saw the one she'd made of my mother, half finished, with one hand extended, like reaching for something not yet drawn. We didn't say goodbye to everyone. We didn't make a speech or explain our leaving. We simply walked through the halls one last time, touching nothing, taking nothing, just observing. The photographs were still on the walls. The furniture still gleamed. But something had shifted, and we weren't part of the decor anymore. We had stepped out of their portrait. At the bottom of the stairs, my mother was waiting, not dressed in her usual silk and pearls, but in a simple cardigan and soft shoes. She looked smaller in the morning light, not fragile, just real. She nodded once as we approached, her eyes holding Layla's longer than mine. Then she did something I will never forget. She knelt, slowly, with effort, and she held out both arms. Layla looked at me, unsure, then stepped forward and hugged her. My mother closed her eyes, pressing her lips to Layla's hair, as if memorizing the feel of something she would miss more than she could say. When she stood, she turned to me. "I'm sorry I didn't raise you softer," she said. "I thought the world would punish softness." I nodded, swallowing something thick. It did, but I survived anyway. She smiled, not wide but full. "I see that now. Henry didn't come down, neither did the others. We didn't wait." The ride back was quiet, but not heavy. Layla leaned against the window, sketching in her lap. I drove without music, letting the road hum between us. Somewhere past the third toll booth, she looked up. "Do you think she'll write?" I thought for a moment. "Maybe not soon, but maybe someday." Layla nodded. I left her a note in the bench. It said, "Trees don't forget their roots, even if the soil was cold." I blinked. "You wrote that?" She shrugged. It just felt true. Back home, the house felt smaller but warmer. The air smelled like us, like lemon soap and old books and peanut butter toast. Layla unpacked without being asked, placing the drawing of the magnolia tree above her desk. I watched her for a moment, then stepped into the kitchen. I poured myself coffee, sat at the table and breathed, really breathed. The next morning, a letter arrived. Just one. No stamp, no sender. Inside was a drawing. Mine. From that old box my mother had kept, but she had added to it. Colored in the flowers, filled the background with soft shades of green. At the bottom, her handwriting, still growing. I held it for a long time. Then I framed it and placed it beside Layla's. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel erased. I felt seen. It's been 3 weeks since we left the house on the hill, and in that time, nothing extraordinary has happened. There were no dramatic calls, no sudden visits, no revelations. But sometimes, healing doesn't arrive with trumpets. Sometimes it shows up in the silence that follows a storm, in the softness that slowly returns to your own voice. Layla still draws trees, but now they have deeper roots, broader branches. I watch her sometimes, curled up by the window, sketching with a kind of peace I didn't know could live in a child who's been to a place like that and returned not broken, but blooming. As for me, I've learned to sit with stillness, not the kind that suffocates, but the kind that listens. I no longer try to rewrite the past. I let it be what it was. And I let today be what it is, ordinary, imperfect, and mine. I haven't heard from my mother since the drawing arrived, and yet I keep the frame where I can see it every morning. Not because I expect more, but because sometimes a single act of recognition is enough. Sometimes a quiet truth whispered between generations does more than all the apologies we never learned how to give. We're still growing, all of us, and that's enough.